Hello and welcome to another episode of the Alpha Project. My name is Pedro Relvas. I'm your host of these episodes, and I am peg fed. And I thought I'd start today by addressing calories. It's something that's quite common. We all want to know more about calories. We understand that the best way to drop weight is calorie deficit, calories in versus your calories out. But now, being peg fed, I've had a very interesting experience with my tube feeds once I left hospital. So I thought I'd basically touch on that. I would basically start addressing my food when I left the hospital and I was being peg fed. At the hospital, there was this type of our core spaceman food, which had all your minerals and vitamins and proteins and carbohydrates in there. It was just kind of like a formula, like an up and go formula, you might say. With this, there's different types of food. There was the energy multifiber, the energy, just the fiber. And I used the energy multifiber one, which was the one that had higher fiber, but obviously more energy per feed. There were 500 mils per bottle. In the 500 mils, there was 1,500 calories in the energy multifiber one. I was having 3 of those a day, which equates to about 4,500 calories. And would you believe that I did not put on any weight whatsoever? Prior to my surgery, I was weighing around 80, 82. And then post-surgery, I was as low as my 60, 65. Once I started feeding through my peg feed, I managed to get my weight back up, but I couldn't break the 70s, even though I was having 4,500 calories a day. And that definitely got my brain working and putting first-hand experience into how food gets processed in the body and how the calories actually work and how our body utilizes calories taught me a lot about what is now commonly known as the calorie deficit program in order to lose weight. Personally, I think there's a lot more that goes involved. I think there's a lot more involved in it. As an example, I'm going to use the analogy of our bank accounts versus our calorie intake. Let's look at the dollar value and equate that to a calorie. Now, with our bank account, we obviously want to know how much money we're making. And we want to know how much money is going in, how much money we're spending. So in order to make more money, we have to limit the amount of dollars that leave our bank account in order to create savings. But there are many variables that go into savings, such as banking fees, interest fees. And if we're using our card just to walk around and pay for things, we can lose track how much money we're actually spending. But as long as we have a general idea, the same principle applies to our calories. With the thermogenic effect of food and how our body processes certain foods, that usually means the amount of calories in that food in order to digest it. As an example, protein will use about 20 to 25% of its own calories in order to be digested. That's how much energy the body needs in order to break down protein. Now, again, depending on the different blood types, the energy required will be again different. Some people can digest protein a lot easier than others, which means their body often requires less energy. So if you're putting into your FitnessPal or any document where you're tracking your calories and you write down 100 calories for chicken, you have to bear in mind that based on the thermogenic effect of food, you could be using anywhere between 20 to 25 calories of that chicken in order to digest it. So you'd only be absorbing around 75 to 80 calories. So when you bring this stuff into account, we can see that calories is something very, very hard to control, that it's absolute variable. And that can bring a lot of stress in when we're trying to control something that we only have a limited amount of power over as far as directing where the calories go and where they come from. Now, in that spaceman food, I was having 4,500 calories of everything that was required from me for my nutritional intake, for my diet, and for my health. However, despite the minerals and vitamins being in there, most of it was synthetic, I feel. It wasn't real food. This is why Wholesome Meal Blends or Wholesome Blends is one of the best companies I know out there creating food for children and for families that are peg fed. This is real food that has been cooked and there is no processed stuff in it. It's blended naturally and it's then put into a bag and then given to the people that require it. Now, with this food, there is a big difference. With this food being natural food, the body's obviously going to take it up very, very differently. So once again, when we look at the calories that we're getting based on that food, getting the actual calorie expenditure is quite hard. Now, I want to also bear in mind that our body's uptake, what requires calories, everything we do requires calories. So when we're looking at what calories we require, and we look at our BMR, which is our basal metabolic rate, we need to understand that this is the rate of our digestive system in a state of coma, you could say, where the basal metabolic rate is the rate of the basal metabolic rate is how many calories we are required to be in a coma state, I would say. There's no digestive system. Our brains are relaxed. There's no cognitive function really other than our heartbeat and our breathing. So if we were lying in a bed, how many calories would we need at a certain weight to maintain that weight in our body from the sedentary position? So when we look at our BMR, that's the bare minimum. Once we add training to that, that will be anywhere between another 300 to 500 calories that we add onto our BMR, which is the energy required for our bodies to physically do training. Things that we don't really count on either is the energy required for our body to recover from the training. So the energy to rebuild the muscle, to repair the tissue, that's also going to require energy from the body to replenish that. Cognitive function, as an example, our brains work predominantly as carbohydrates as a fuel source. So in order to maintain adequate brain function, if we stress or going through high bouts of anxiety, or we have projects at work that we need to deal with, our calorie intake actually goes up. We'll require more nutritional food. So guys, when we're looking at our bank account and we can see that money's going in and out, as long as our bank account is increasing weekly, based on the efforts we are putting in, is the same thing that we want to see our weight or our muscle gain increase or decrease depending on our goals as the time goes on. And we control that calorie expenditure as required the more we get to know our bodies. I hope this has given you some insight into understanding calories, that they're not an absolute number. When we start looking and saying that the bare minimum I can have is 1,800 calories or 2,000 calories a day, and we count those calories, there are so many variables that we can't actually add or take into account because they're just hard to track. So it makes it extremely difficult to get an absolute number. And then we're going to get hard on ourselves because we haven't maintained our diet. We've had that extra calorie over. It's the same thing if we go shopping. Obviously, we want to try and save as much money as we can. But if we have a good deal, sometimes we'll spend a little bit more, but we'll get more results from that. The same thing applies to our calorie intake. Some foods that we have might be slightly higher in calories. Our bodies might not be used to digesting it, which means we require a little bit more energy in order to digest it. So as you can see, guys, there's a constant ongoing flow of understanding our calories and our intake. Now, our bodies are actual chemical systems. We use chemicals that creates an energy byproduct. So when we're looking at our bodies purely from an energy perspective, it also just negates what the compounds in our system could be doing to either increase or decrease that required energy, and hence it fucks around a little bit with our metabolism. So guys, the most important thing to remember is work out your BMR. You can put that into a formula online. You just use your age, your weight, and your activity levels. It will give you an idea of what your BMR is. On average, some formulas will actually add in what you might require for training, and depending on your daily activity levels. All right, guys, so when you're looking at your calories, just remember it's like your bank account. The main goal is to keep them healthy, running at a slight deficit, but take into account that you do need calories to recover and to get better. I hope that helped. Thanks.